Hi, and this video we're talking about a really interesting science thing, which is basically a person called Henrietta Lacks, who was a person born in 1920 and became famous for some really interesting science things because technically a part of her cells were immortal. And the way this happened was she eventually, after a while, died of a form of cancer. The way cancer works is normally it'll make your cells basically grow out of control and kill themselves, which can be really disastrous. But their cells were, instead like normal cancer cells just growing and dying, her cells were growing faster than they were dying, meaning that her cells weren't just fizzling out. So basically, even when she died, part of her body was still alive with those cells that were growing infinitely. So eventually, one day, some of their cells were stolen from their dead body to basically be tested on and experimented with. The cells were given to the scientist George Otto Gray, and they basically named them the HeLa line of cells because they would grow infinitely. Eventually they tested on them, so it basically became a farm of human cells. So they could just infinitely produce and pump out human cells that could be tested on. So people were like using those cells to basically test them instead of actually testing a human. They were testing on those cells, which basically they did make a lot of scientific breakthroughs through that. But here's where it gets confusing with some things. Also, people still don't actually know why their cells were growing like that from the cancer. But here's where it gets confusing with a bunch of basically unsolvable answers, which are it's kind of strange because their cells were taken without permission from their dead body and without permission of them or their family. So basically, without permission, their cells were taken and experimented on. And then another thing is, people sometimes say it's okay that they were taken without their permission because it helped cure a lot of other things, meaning what they did to basically to take those cells without permission is outweighed by the fact that it did so much good in the end. But that's where it runs into even more issues, because those cells, even though they're being used as if they're just normal human cells to test things on, they're not normal human cells because they had something different about them than average human cells. They had cancer, and they had a different form of cancer than anything else people know about. So they're very unique, which means it's kind of unknown how reliable they would be when people are testing scientific research on them. So there's a lot of strange and confusing problems around should those cells be usable? Those cells were mailed all over the world, and now they've basically just become a massive cell farm, so people can scientifically test things on them, which is pretty interesting. There's tons of other stuff about the person. Eventually, there's things like how a small part of the this is just a random fact, but a small part of the solar system was actually named after them. It was named a string of numbers, and then the last bit of it was named Lacks, basically in memory of them and how many scientific breakthroughs their cells caused. So yeah, that's kind of near the end of the video. This is kind of a short video. It's kind of just meant to be a brief overview of some of the things about their cells and what happened to them. But yeah, thank you for watching. Please subscribe, and goodbye.